Welcome to your Healing Place podcast with Linda and Mindy. It is our desire to address common concerns of how abortion and faith intersect in order to validate the emotional pain and grief that abortion can bring and give hope that recovery is possible. So, Linda, we want to talk about the road to abortion. And I always tell people that abortion doesn't come by itself. It's not like we wake up one day and decide to have abortion. There are things that have to happen before an abortion can happen. And some of those things oftentimes are traumatic. Sometimes they are things way back in our past. Sometimes they are very specific to surrounding the pregnancy and the relationship. And abortion just does not come by itself.
Yeah, we made some choices to get us to that point.
Or
And
some choices were made against us.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What was
hmm
your road to abortion? What did that look like?
Um, it was pretty standard. I knew the Lord, but
Okay.
in high school started having sex with my boyfriend. That's the first step for a lot of us. And that took me away from God, being close to Him, and then wanting to cover my sin, just like King David, wanted to cover his sin with Bathsheba.
Mm.
And ended up killing her husband. Um, yeah, I think that was the major choice. And in dealing with the sin of choosing abortion, I also had to deal with the sin that was a step back that got me there of having sex with my boyfriend. And that's Satan. He gets us a little bit at a time. James talks about how he entices us
Mm.
and draws us in, and the end result is death. And so, as we get into repentance,
Mhm.
sometimes it's important to go back to those earlier steps as well that got
Mhm.
us to the point.
And what I heard you say, I felt like we kind of had a high level view of your road to abortion. But if we were to come down closer, what else would be on that road that influenced you to have abortion? Because you mentioned you were in the church.
Yeah,
Where was the
yeah.
church?
Well, back in 76, the church wasn't saying much, unfortunately. Um, but even if it was, I don't know that I would have been open to hearing it because of the shame. Because I mean, I have dealt with so many women through the years that are pastors' daughters, and sometimes that increases the pressure
Hmm.
on so many of us that have this
Yeah.
image to try to maintain,
Yeah.
um, to make the abortion choice because we don't want anybody to know. We don't want to shame the church. We don't want to shame our parents. So sometimes that makes it even harder.
What about the image of yourself? How did that contribute to where you were?
The image of self. Well, I didn't want to admit that I was a sinner. None of us do.
Yeah.
And so that definitely that pride was a huge factor for me.
Mm. My road to abortion started years before that. So it started in my childhood with some abuse and just this thought that started to seed and take root in my mind that who treats people like this that are lovable? I apparently am not lovable. And it
Mm,
was this little girl thought. And as I got older in the culture and I'm watching all this stuff on TV, sex is something you do and it's glamorized and you know, it it's it means you're loved, right? It means you're
wrapped up with your
wanted.
value.
Yeah, it is. It means you
Hmm
have value. And I so desperately needed that. And so I started engaging in sex too in high school. And um, just because I felt like, gosh, well, maybe if I give this, I'll get what I want, which was to be valued truly, like deeply, authentically. Sex doesn't bring that kind of value in and of itself. So there was that. And then there was a date rape in my past. There was some abuse from a boyfriend in my past. And of course, there's a neglect of my dad, his choices when I was young that
Right.
still weighed on me, that fed into that voice who does this to people. And then I started being that kind of person. I started hurting other people intentionally.
Mhm.
And that just kind of led me down this road. And so when I found myself pregnant for the first time, that um the father of that baby, we had already broke up and he was gone. I didn't even know how to find him anymore. And I was already with somebody else. And he's
Mhm.
like, well, you're pregnant. It's me or the baby. And
Mhm.
if the baby goes, I'll stay. And I thought, well, okay. I mean, this is my deepest need, right? I did not
Mhm.
know the Lord. And that's how it went for the next, two abortions, because I had three abortions. That road, there was a lot of things to deal with in that road when I came to healing. There was so many things, but the abortion was one of the things that I knew I did to somebody else that I had
Mhm.
to really, really grapple with. A
Mhm.
lot of those things were done to me and they hurt deeply, obviously, and they kept me stuck for a really long time. But the abortion was truly a deep, deep wound that I had to deal
So
with.
when we look at the road to abortion, it's a broken road. It's a broken world. And that's why we look at some of the other people involved that have hurt us and the need to forgive.
Yeah.
But it is important for us to look at the overall picture that got us there and to recognize that God can redeem it all. He can redeem it all.
And he can. Oh my gosh, he can. Um, and we'll go into redemption in another segment, but um, the redeeming love of Christ is real, it's deep, it's not hindered by a specific choice. Sin is sin, and it's vast. I mean, there's just no getting to the boundaries, the end of God's love. Well, you think about that. If you're familiar with that movie, The Truman Show, years ago, with no, who was that? Why am I'm blanking on his name. But anyway, he lived in this set, a movie set, and people were watching his life, right? And
And he didn't know it was a movie set. He thought it was just real life.
yeah, yeah. And then he got frustrated with it. I can't remember exactly how he did, but he finally got in a boat and he's just like, I'm just sailing away. And he's out on the boat and they're creating storms for him and all this stuff. And then eventually he hits a wall and it's the end of the set. It's the end of the blue screen, if you will. And he sees a set of stairs and he climbs up and he goes out the door and he's done, you know. And I always think about that because
Hmm.
however, I know it's TV, but however big that set was, he was able to row for a really long time, right? But God's love is so vast and so wide and so high that we're not going to come to the end of it. We're not going to exhaust his love. He came and died for us for that very reason, because we couldn't help ourselves and we needed him to make a way.
When we come to the end of it and turn it over to him, he takes us out of this world into a bigger world. Yes, exactly. The real world, the spiritual world that is there, that he has for us. And there's freedom there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just real quick, as I think about the road to abortion, because some of us take years to come to terms with the abortion that we've had. So that road actually goes to abortion, but then we continue down a road of destruction in many cases, and it can look different for everybody. But those things need to be healed too. And we don't really realize until we look back that there was a connection and rooted in the abortion itself, the
Mhm.
destruction rooted there, because usually abortion is an event. It's not like a continual habit, you
And it
know?
can be anywhere on the road. I know we dealt with some gals in Christian rehab, and several of them were saying that abortion was the beginning point of
Mm,
years of addictions,
mm,
because it destroyed their self-esteem and because it set them up for all these other things that happened to them. Um, or abortion may be just one more point, one more sign point along that whole road,
hmm
that started with sexual abuse or something in the
hmm
background, and abortion was just a continuation, not the beginning point. So it can happen anywhere along in that road.
hmm
But again, as we begin to heal, God can deal with each of the issues. And sometimes they need to be dealt with individually. Sometimes abortion healing is one step that needs to be dealt with, and there's others along the way as well that we need additional help with.
Equally. Yeah, equally as traumatic or as damaging or destructive.
Right.
Absolutely. Like when you said, some of those are on the road to abortion, and then they have a pretty bad previous life, and then abortion happens, and that just furthers it. And that was kind of like me. I felt like there was a line dug in the sand at each abortion that I had, and I couldn't go back. I could never be whole
What you were
again.
before.
Yeah,
Mm,
I could never, and I won't ever be who I was before, but I can be healed. I can be whole in Jesus. I can be healed in
absolutely.
Jesus, and I have been. And that's our hope for everybody listening to this. Thank you for listening. This podcast was inspired by the many conversations had through the years with women struggling from the emotional pain associated with abortion. Thank you for allowing us into your healing journey. Subscribe on major platforms where podcasts can be heard. Learn more about virtual abortion recovery healing at www.anevenplace.com. The link is in the show notes.